My boss, the CEO, abandoned my proposal. My breath hitched in my throat, stood in the lobby of Sterling Heights Plaza, my chest heaving, coming out in jagged. I had spent 5 years, 3 months, and 12 days building a life within these glass walls. And in exactly 12 minutes that life had been erased. I looked down at the box in my arms. It was a pathetic collection, a succulent that had died 3 weeks ago because I was too busy to water it. A world's best lead mug my team had bought me before Marcus turned them against me. A stack of notebooks filled with ideas that no longer belonged to me. I saw him then, Marcus. My boss. My mentor. The man I had trusted with my career, my loyalty, and at one point my friendship. He was standing by the glass elevators, bathed in the warm, expensive glow of the lobby lights. He was laughing. He was showing something on his phone to Sarah, the intern who had been at the company for less than a month. He didn't even look at me. Not a glance. Not a flicker of guilt. He stood there celebrating a victory he had stolen from my hands. He didn't have the decency to watch the woman he'd just destroyed walk out into the storm. I stepped through the revolving doors. The wind hit me like a physical blow. My box slipped, and a single silver stapler, a gift from my father, clattered onto the wet pavement. I stared at it. I didn't pick it up. I just let the rain wash over it, mirroring the way I felt, discarded, cold, and utterly broken. Before I tell you how I lost everything, and how I eventually forced them to beg for my mercy, I need to ask you something. Have you ever looked at someone you trusted, someone you would have taken a bullet for, and realized they were the ones pulling the trigger? If you've ever been the person who gave their all only to be stepped on, subscribe to this channel right now. Don't hesitate. By subscribing, you're standing up against the Marcuses of the world, and if you're the kind of person who can watch someone's life fall apart and feel nothing, then go ahead, keep scrolling. But if you have a soul, I want you to drop a comment right now and tell me where you are watching from. I need to know how far this story reaches, because the truth I'm about to reveal is something every hardworking person on this planet needs to hear. Now, let's go back to where the rot began. 2 weeks before, if you had walked into Sterling & Co., back then, you would have seen a woman who thought she was on top of the world. That woman was me, Elena Vance, senior creative lead. I didn't just work at the firm. I was the firm. I was the first one in at 6 a.m., watching the sunrise hit the skyscrapers of the financial district while I sipped a lukewarm black coffee. I was the last one out, usually around midnight, making sure every font, every data point, and every strategy slide was perfect. I didn't mind the hours. I didn't mind the missed birthdays or the empty apartment. I believed in the Phoenix Project. The Phoenix Project was my masterpiece. It was a revolutionary internal restructure and digital expansion plan designed to save Sterling & Co. from the aggressive buyouts happening across the sector. We were bleeding money, and the board was looking for heads to roll. I spent 3 months of my life, no sleep, no social life, just pure caffeine and ambition, crafting the solution. Marcus Sterling, the CEO, had been my biggest cheerleader. Elena, he'd say, leaning against my office door with that effortless, silver-tongued charm. You're the engine of this place. The board doesn't see the gears turning, but I do. You bring us home on this, and there's a partner desk with your name on it. I promise. I believed him. Why wouldn't I? He was the one who promoted me. He was the one who sent me flowers when my mother passed away. He was my work family. The first day of the beginning of the end started like any other. I had the final Phoenix proposal bound and ready, 500 pages of sheer brilliance, if I do say so myself. I walked into Marcus's office. This was it. The moment my life changed. Marcus didn't even look up from his iPad. Put it on the desk, Elena, he said, his voice flat. No, good morning. No, how are you? I've got the implementation timeline on slide 40, I said, trying to inject some energy into the room. The projected ROI is 22% within the first quarter. I said, put it on the desk. He finally looked up. His eyes were cold. Not angry, just empty. I'll look at it when I have time. Right now, I need you to focus on the Henderson account. They're complaining about the billables again. I felt a small, sharp pain in my chest. The Henderson account? Marcus, that's junior level work. I need to walk you through the Phoenix Project before the board meeting on Friday. The board meeting has been pushed back, he lied. He didn't even blink. Now go do your job, Elena. I left his office with a hollow feeling in the pit of my stomach. I told myself he was just stressed. The firm was under pressure, and he was taking it out on his most reliable soldier. That's what we do, right? We make excuses for the people we admire because the alternative is too terrifying to face. I walked past the break room and saw Sarah, the new intern. She was 22, and had a habit of forgetting to BCC people on emails. She was currently holding a stack of my Phoenix project drafts, the ones I'd thrown in the secure shredding bin. She smiled at me. It was a small, tight smile. "Hard at work, Elena?" she asked. "Always, Sarah," I replied, my voice clipped. "Why do you have those?" "Oh, Marcus asked me to help him organize. You know how he is. So messy." I should have known then. I should have seen the way her eyes darted to the CEO's office. I should have realized that organizing was corporate speak for harvesting. But I was too tired, too loyal, and too invested in the lie that hard work is always rewarded. If I had known what they were planning, I would have walked out that day. I would have deleted every file, and left them to drown in their own incompetence. But I didn't. I went back to my desk. I opened the Henderson file, and I started to work. That was the last time I ever felt safe in that building. And looking back, it was the last time I ever let myself be a victim. The next few days were a masterclass in psychological warfare. But back then, I didn't call it that. I called it being a team player. My life was a series of rituals. I was a creature of habit, and those habits were the walls of my cage. Every morning at 5:15 a.m., my alarm would go off. I'd spend 20 minutes in the dark, staring at the ceiling, calculating the day's risks. By 6:30, I was at my desk. I loved the office when it was empty. It felt like the building belonged to me. The blue glow of the monitors, the smell of the filtered air, it was sterile, but it was mine. I felt safe there. I felt like as long as I was the smartest, hardest working person in the room, nobody could touch me. Marcus would usually arrive around 8:45. He'd walk past my glass-walled office, knock twice on the pane, and give me a thumbs up. It was our thing. A silent acknowledgement that we were the ones steering the ship. "Did you get that Henderson data cleaned up?" he asked one Tuesday, popping his head in. "Finished it at 2 a.m., I said, rubbing my eyes. "It's on your desk. You're a machine, Elena. Truly. Listen, I'm going to be tied up with Sarah for the next few days. We're doing some high-level administrative overhauls. Don't worry about the Phoenix project for now. Just keep the lights on elsewhere, okay?" High-level administrative overhauls with an intern? The thought tasted like copper in my mouth. But I swallowed it. I told myself that Marcus was grooming her for a junior role so I could finally have an assistant. I told myself he was protecting my time so I wouldn't get bogged down in the implementation details. Isn't it funny how the brain works? When you love a dream, you'll ignore the smell of smoke until the room is actually on fire. I remember a lunch I had with Marcus and a few of the senior partners about 10 days before the end. We were at the Gilded Lily, the kind of place where the water costs $12 and the chairs are more comfortable than my bed. Marcus was in rare form. He was charming the partners, telling stories about our early days when the firm was just 3 people in a basement. "And Elena here," he said, gesturing toward me with a wine glass. "She was there for the first big win. She's the memory of this company." The partners nodded and smiled. I felt a glow of pride. I felt seen. But then, the conversation shifted. "So, Marcus," one of the partners, a shark named Arthur, leaned forward. "This new Vanguard initiative you mentioned in the private memo. It sounds like a total game changer. Is it ready for the board?" I froze. My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. Vanguard? I'd never heard that name. But the way Arthur described it, the digital expansion, the restructuring, it sounded exactly like the Phoenix project. I looked at Marcus. For a split second, I saw it. A flicker of panic in his eyes. It was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by that smooth, practiced smile. "We're still polishing the brass, Arthur. It's a collective effort, but Sarah has been doing some incredible legwork on the presentation side of things. We'll be ready." The table moved on. They talked about golf and the market. I sat there, my heart thumping against my ribs. Sarah? Sarah was doing the legwork on my project? And why had the name changed? After lunch, as we walked back to the office, I pulled Marcus aside. "Marcus, what's the Vanguard initiative?" He didn't stop walking. He didn't even look at me. Just a rebranding, Elena. Phoenix felt a little cliché. Don't you think? Rising from the ashes? It implies we were burnt out. Vanguard sounds like the future. But Sarah is working on it. Marcus, she doesn't know the back-end architecture. She doesn't understand the legal implications of the data migration. He stopped then. He turned to me, and for the first time in 5 years he used his CEO voice, not the mentor voice. The boss voice. Elena. You're overthinking. You're the architect. Sarah is just the interior decorator. She's making it look pretty for the board. You know how they are, they like shiny things. Now, go back to your office. I need those quarterly projections by 5. I watched him walk away. His gait was confident. His shoulders were broad. I felt small. I felt like a child being told to go play in the sandbox while the adults talked. I spent that night going through our shared server. I wanted to see what Sarah had been decorating. But when I tried to open the Phoenix folder, access denied. I tried again. Access denied. My pulse quickened. I checked my permissions. I was still a senior lead. I should have had access to everything. I called the IT night desk. Hey, it's Elena. I'm locked out of the Phoenix directory. Can you reset my bypass? There was a long pause on the other end. I could hear the technician typing. Elena? I can't do that. There's a manual lock on those files, it says. Restricted to executive level and authorized assistants only. I am the executive level for that project. I snapped. I'm sorry, Elena. The authorization list only has 2 names on it, Marcus Sterling and Sarah Miller. My hands are tied. I sat in the dark of my office, the only light coming from the access denied box on my screen. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. It wasn't just a rebranding. It wasn't just a pretty presentation. They were locking me out of my own house. Looking back, that was the first warning I ignored. I told myself it was a technical error. I told myself Marcus would fix it in the morning. I was so desperate to believe in the illusion of my normal life that I refused to see the knife being sharpened right in front of me. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my sofa, staring at the blinking light of my router, wondering why the world felt like it was shifting 3 inches to the left. The next morning was the Vanguard launch breakfast. It was supposed to be a small internal celebration before the big board meeting. I dressed in my best charcoal suit. I wanted to look like the authority I knew I was. I wanted to walk into that room and have Marcus apologize for the IT glitch and hand me back the reins. I walked into the conference suite on the 42nd floor. The room was decorated in silver and deep blue, the colors of the new Vanguard branding. There was a buffet of smoked salmon and expensive pastries that nobody was eating. Everyone was gathered around the large 90-inch monitor at the front of the room. I saw Marcus. He was holding a glass of orange juice, leaning in close to Arthur, the senior partner. Sarah was on his other side, wearing a dress that looked more like a cocktail party outfit than office wear. She was glowing. "Ah, Elena," Marcus called out as he saw me. His voice was jovial, but his eyes were like flint. "So glad you could join us for the unveiling." "I'd love to see it," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Since I've been locked out of the files for 36 hours. The room went quiet. A few of the junior associates looked down at their plates. Marcus didn't miss a beat. He laughed, a warm, paternal sound that made my skin crawl. "Technical security, Elena. You know how it is. With a project this sensitive, we had to tighten the circle. Only for a few days. Don't be so sensitive." He turned to the screen. "Sarah, why don't you do the honors?" Sarah stepped forward. She clicked the remote. The presentation began. It was a masterpiece of motion graphics. The Vanguard Initiative logo dissolved into a series of complex data visualizations. I felt a knot tighten in my chest. It was my work. Every algorithm. Every projected market pivot. Every contingency plan. She was clicking through slides I had labored over during the nights I'd forgotten to eat. She was presenting my logic, my research, my soul. But the names at the bottom of every slide read: Lead Architect, Marcus Sterling. Project Manager, Sarah Miller. My name was gone. Not just moved. Not just relegated to contributor. It was deleted. It was as if I didn't exist. "Incredible," Arthur whispered. He began to clap. Then the whole room followed. I stood there, frozen. I felt like I was watching my own funeral. Except I was the only one who knew I was still alive. Sarah beamed. Thank you, Arthur. It was a lot of late nights, but Marcus and I really felt that the human-centric approach was the missing piece from the earlier drafts. The earlier drafts. My drafts. She was calling my life's work a draft that she had fixed. I looked at Marcus. I expected him to say something. To give me a wink. To say, and of course, Elena laid the foundation. He didn't. He looked right through me. Great job, Sarah, Marcus said, loud enough for everyone to hear. I haven't seen this kind of intuitive thinking in years. You've breathed new life into this firm. Say something, Elena. Scream. Throw your glass, tell them the truth. But I didn't. I chose silence. I felt a hot, prickly wave of shame wash over me. Why was I ashamed? I hadn't done anything wrong. But that's the trick of a public betrayal, it makes the victim feel like the one who should be embarrassed. I felt exposed. I felt like a fool who had spent 5 years building a throne for a man who intended to execute me on it. I walked toward the door. I moved with a slow, mechanical precision. Elena? Where are you going? Marcus called out, his tone mockingly concerned. The celebration is just starting. I turned back to him. I didn't let my eyes water. I didn't let my voice shake. I have a lot of Henderson filings to finish, Marcus, I said. Since that's where my level is now. I saw a flash of irritation on his face. He didn't like the reminder of his cruelty in front of the partners. He wanted me to play the part of the happy, supportive subordinate. He wanted me to help him pretend that this wasn't a robbery. I walked out of the room. The door clicked shut behind me, cutting off the sound of the applause. I went to the restroom, locked myself in the far stall, and sat on the closed lid. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I was too busy trying to remember how to breathe. I thought it was a mistake. I thought if I just waited, if I showed them how much better I was than Sarah, the truth would come out. I thought the meritocracy I believed in would save me. It wasn't a mistake. It was a calculated, cold-blooded execution. And the worst part? It was only the beginning. I walked back to my desk 10 minutes later. I sat down. I opened the Henderson file. I began to type. But I wasn't working anymore. I was waiting. The days following the Vanguard reveal felt like being buried alive. Slowly, grain by grain. I tried to act normal. I tried to talk to my colleagues, people I'd mentored, people I'd shared drinks with for years. But they were changing. When I walked into the break room, conversations would die. When I asked for data on the new project, eyes would shift to the floor. Marcus had poisoned the well. He hadn't just stolen my work. He was rebranding me as the bitter veteran who couldn't handle a younger, fresher talent like Sarah. I finally caught him alone in the hallway on Wednesday. Marcus, we need to talk. My name isn't on the board report. The architecture is mine. The legal framework is mine. I need to know how this is being corrected. He didn't even stop walking. He just slowed down enough to look at me with a look of profound, fake pity. Elena, we've talked about this. Your contribution was noted. But the project shifted. Sarah brought a collaborative energy to it that you, well, frankly, you lack. You're too possessive. It's a toxic trait, Elena. It's making the team uncomfortable. I stopped in my tracks. Toxic? I worked 80 hours a week for 3 months, Marcus. I missed my sister's wedding for this project. He sighed, a long, dramatic sound. And that was your choice. Nobody asked for that level of obsession. It's worrying, actually. I think you're remembering your input as being much larger than it actually was. Memory is a fickle thing under stress, don't you think? He was doing it. He was trying to rewrite my own mind. He wanted me to believe that I was the problem. That I was crazy. That I was unnecessary. That evening, I stayed late. Not because I had work to do, they'd stripped me of everything but the Henderson filings, but because I couldn't face the silence of my empty apartment. I felt like if I left, I'd be admitting I didn't belong here anymore. I was sitting at my desk, the monitor off, just watching the city lights flicker through the glass. Then, I heard voices. Marcus and Sarah. They were coming down the hall toward Marcus's office, which was just 3 doors down from mine. I didn't move. I didn't turn on a light. Something in my gut told me to stay in the shadows. The board loved the Vanguard branding, Sarah was saying. Her voice lacked that sugary sweetness she used in meetings. It was sharp, calculated. But the investors are asking about the encryption keys. They want to know why the system keeps flagging unauthorized access during the stress tests. I heard the heavy click of Marcus's office door closing, but it didn't latch. It stayed open just a crack. It's just a legacy setting Elena put in. Marcus's voice was muffled but clear. She built the whole thing on a proprietary shell she designed years ago. She's the only one with the primary authorization. I've tried to bypass it, but the code is stubborn. Like her. We need to get rid of her, Marcus, Sarah snapped. The more she's around, the more people start asking questions. I saw Arthur talking to her yesterday. If she says anything, she won't, Marcus interrupted. I've already positioned her as mentally unstable to the board. If she talks, it just looks like a disgruntled employee having a breakdown. I'm giving it one more week. Once I get the full server migration finished, I'll fire her for performance issues. She'll be so tied up in the shame of it, she'll never look at the code again. My heart wasn't just pounding, it was echoing in my ears. I felt cold. A deep, crystalline cold that started in my chest and moved to my fingertips. And the rival firm? Sarah asked. What did they say? They're willing to pay double the board's valuation for the light version of the architecture. Marcus chuckled. They don't know it's the same tech Sterling & Co. is using. By the time they realize, I'll be long gone with my exit bonus. We both will. I sat there in the dark, my breath coming in slow, silent draws. They weren't just stealing my project. They were committing corporate espionage. They were using my work to destroy the company I had helped build. And they were going to use my reputation as the shield to hide behind. If you're listening to this, and you've ever felt the moment the world stops spinning, you know what I felt. I wasn't sad anymore. I wasn't confused. The gaslighting had lost its power because I finally had the one thing they didn't think I could get. The truth. I reached out and slowly, silently, turned on my computer. I didn't look at the Henderson files. I looked at the hidden partition in my personal cloud. The one Marcus didn't know existed. Then I overheard something I was never meant to hear, not just their plan to fire me, but the one thing Marcus had forgotten. He thought he had the Vanguard system. But he didn't realize that I hadn't finished the bridge. The system wasn't just stubborn, it was incomplete. And I was the only one with the missing piece. There is a specific kind of silence that follows a life-shattering realization. It isn't empty, it's heavy. It's the silence of a predator that has finally spotted its mark. I sat in the dark of my office for a long time after Marcus and Sarah's footsteps faded down the hall. I didn't turn on the overhead lights. I didn't want to be Elena Vance, the senior lead or the loyal employee. I wanted to be a ghost. I looked at my hands in the glow of the dual monitors. They weren't shaking anymore. The humiliation of the morning, the clapping for Sarah, the pitying looks from the partners, it all felt like it had happened to a different person. A person who was now dead. I opened a terminal window. My fingers moved across the mechanical keyboard with a familiar, soothing rhythm. Marcus was right about one thing. The Phoenix project, now Vanguard, was built on a proprietary shell I'd developed over 3 years. It was my library of Alexandria. Every line of code was a shelf I had built by hand. Marcus and Sarah were currently walking through that library, rearranging the furniture and claiming they'd built the walls. But they hadn't checked the foundation. I bypassed the front-end restrictions they'd placed on my account. It was easy. It was like trying to lock a locksmith out of her own house with a plastic toy key. I began to dig into the server logs. I wanted to see what Sarah had been doing in the administrative overhauls Marcus mentioned. I expected to find sloppy code or stolen assets. What I found was much, much worse. Sarah hadn't just been decorating the presentation. She had been installing a backdoor script. A ghost protocol designed to siphon encrypted client data specifically from our high-net-worth offshore accounts into an external, untraceable server. They aren't just selling a light version to a competitor. They're setting up the firm to be the fall guy for a massive data heist. They're going to drain the accounts, let the system crash, and leave me holding the bag as the unstable lead who sabotaged the code out of spite. I felt a wave of nausea, followed immediately by a strange, cold clarity. The unauthorized access flags Sarah had mentioned to Marcus? Those weren't glitches. Those were the heartbeat sensors I'd built into the core. Every time she tried to move data through her back door, the system was screaming at her in a language she didn't understand. She thought the system was stubborn. She didn't realize it was a sentinel. I moved deeper into the directory. I found a folder titled Project Exit. Inside were the draft termination papers Marcus had mentioned. I opened the file. Termination of Elena Vance. Cause: gross negligence, erratic behavior, and suspected internal sabotage of the Vanguard Initiative. The date on the document was set for next Friday. Exactly 7 days from now. I sat back, the blue light of the screen reflecting in my eyes. They had everything planned. The betrayal wasn't just about credit or money. It was about total erasure. They didn't just want my work, they wanted my silence, guaranteed by a destroyed reputation and potential legal charges. I stayed there until 4 a.m. I didn't change a single line of their stolen code. I didn't delete the Project Exit folder. I didn't even leave a footprint. Instead, I did something much more surgical. I looked at the heartbeat sensors. I adjusted the sensitivity just enough so that the unauthorized access flags would stop appearing on Sarah's dashboard. I wanted her to feel safe. I wanted her to think she'd finally tamed my code. I wanted them to keep digging their own graves deeper and deeper, until they were so far down they couldn't see the light anymore. I realized then that I held the ultimate leverage. The system wasn't just a program. It was a trap, and they were walking into it with their pockets open and their eyes shut. But what I didn't know then was how deep the rot really went. I thought it was just Marcus and Sarah. I didn't realize that the hands on the shovel went all the way to the top. The morning after I found the Project Exit folder, the office felt different. The air was too still. It was the kind of calm you feel in the eye of a hurricane, where for a few moments you can almost convince yourself the storm has passed. I was at my desk by 7 a.m., my eyes stinging from lack of sleep, but my mind humming with a terrifying, cold electricity. I expected Marcus to avoid me. I expected more cold shoulders. Instead, at 9:15 a.m., there was a soft, tentative knock on my door. It was Marcus. He wasn't wearing his CEO armor. His tie was loosened, and he was carrying 2 cups of coffee. He looked tired. Vulnerable. "Elena," he said, his voice dropping into that warm paternal register that had fooled me for half a decade. "Can we talk? Just man to man or, well, friend to friend?" I didn't say anything. I just watched him. I watched the way he sat in the guest chair, the way he let out a long, weary sigh as if he were the one carrying the weight of the world. "I've been thinking about the meeting yesterday," he started, staring into his coffee. "I handled it poorly. I was under immense pressure from the board, and I took it out on the person I trust the most. I'm sorry, Elena. Truly. It was perfect. The slight crack in the voice. The eye contact. If I hadn't seen the termination papers 5 hours ago, I would have crumbled. I would have thanked him. I would have apologized to him. The Vanguard branding. It was a mistake to exclude you," he continued. "Sarah is talented, but she's green. She's overwhelmed. The system is throwing errors she can't handle, and honestly, neither can I. This firm needs its architect. I need you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, gold-trimmed envelope. He pushed it across the desk toward me. "That's a formal apology from the executive suite, along with a bonus check for the Phoenix development phase. And more importantly, I want to discuss your promotion to partner. Officially. Next month." I looked at the envelope. I could feel the heat of his gaze, waiting for the relief to wash over my face. This was the false hope phase. It's the most dangerous part of any betrayal. It's the moment the predator offers a bandage to the person they've just stabbed, hoping they'll hold it in place while the blood drains out. "Partner?" I whispered, playing the part. My voice was thick with fake emotion. "You've earned it," Marcus said, leaning forward. "But I need your help, Elena. I need you to give Sarah the master encryption keys. Just so she can stabilize the server while you take a week off. You look exhausted. Go to the spa. Go to the beach. When you come back, your new office will be ready." He was so convincing. For a split second, a tiny, weak part of my brain wanted to believe him. It wanted to believe that the last 2 weeks had been a nightmare, a misunderstanding. It wanted to believe that the world was still a place where loyalty meant something. That calm was the most dangerous part. Because if I had said yes, if I had handed over those keys, I would have been handing him the rope to hang me with. I looked up at him and forced a small, watery smile. "Thank you, Marcus," I said. That means a lot. I'll get the keys ready. I just need to clean up the metadata so Sarah doesn't crash the shell when she logs in. That's my girl, he said, standing up. He looked relieved, truly relieved. Because he thought he'd won. He thought he'd played me. Take your time. No rush. By Friday. By Friday, I promised. He patted the top of my monitor and walked out, his step light and confident again. The mask was back on the moment he turned the corner. I waited until I heard his office door close. Then, I picked up the gold-trimmed envelope. I didn't open it. I knew what was inside, a bribe to keep me quiet for 7 days. I almost felt sorry for him. He was playing a game of checkers, and he thought he was the master. He didn't realize I'd already flipped the board. I stayed at my desk and I began to write a new piece of code. Not a bridge for Sarah. Not a key for Marcus. I was writing a mirror. Whatever Sarah did to the client accounts, the mirror would do to Marcus's personal offshore accounts. Whatever sabotage they tried to pin on me, the mirror would reflect back onto the person who initiated the command. The office was peaceful for the rest of the week. Marcus was kind. Sarah was polite, almost deferential. We ate lunch together. We laughed about old times. It was the most convincing performance of my life. But that calm, that beautiful, lying calm, was just the silence before the scream. I thought I knew the extent of the betrayal. I thought the money and the credit were the end of it. But on Thursday night, I found the one thing I wasn't supposed to see. The thing that made the partner offer look like a joke. That night, the calm died. They say that the truth will set you free. What they don't tell you is that first, it will strip you naked and leave you to freeze. It was Thursday night, the night before my Friday deadline to hand over the master keys. The office was a tomb. Even the security guards were downstairs, distracted by the late-night delivery of the new lobby furniture Marcus had ordered to celebrate the Vanguard's success. I was doing a final sweep of the internal communications server. I wasn't looking for Marcus anymore. I was looking for a ghost. I wanted to see if anyone else in the firm, any of my friends, had stood up for me. I found a private encrypted thread between Marcus and Arthur, the senior board member. Arthur, the man who had given me my first promotion. The man I viewed as a father figure. I opened the thread. I expected to see business talk. I expected to see more talk about siphoning funds. Instead, I saw a PDF attachment titled, Vance, Liability, Closure. I opened it. It wasn't about work. It was a dossier. It contained my private medical records from 3 years ago, the time I had taken a leave of absence to deal with the grief of losing my mother. It contained private emails I'd sent to the company therapist. But it had been edited. They hadn't just stolen my project. They had been building a case to prove I was legally unfit. They were going to use my grief as evidence of a psychotic break. They didn't just want to fire me. They wanted to have me committed. They were going to use the sabotage as proof that I was a danger to myself and others. That way, any NDA I signed would be ironclad because I'd be signing it under the guidance of a court-appointed guardian. And who was that guardian going to be? Arthur. I sat there, staring at the screen. The room felt like it was spinning at 1,000 miles an hour, yet I was perfectly still. They weren't just taking my career. They were taking my human rights. They were going to erase my autonomy so I could never ever tell the world that the Vanguard system was a fraud. I looked at a photo attached to the file. It was a picture of me, taken from across the street a week ago. I was sitting on a park bench, crying. I remember that moment. I thought I was alone. I was just tired. The caption under the photo read, Subject exhibiting erratic emotional behavior and detachment from reality. Recommendation. Immediate clinical intervention following the Friday termination. Something inside me snapped. But it wasn't the kind of snap that leads to a scream. It was the kind of snap that happens when a deep-sea cable breaks under the weight of the ocean. Quiet. Absolute. Final. The Elena who cared about the Phoenix Project died in that moment. The Elena who wanted a promotion, who wanted Marcus's approval, who wanted to be a partner. She evaporated. I didn't feel the cold anymore. I didn't feel the rain. I felt nothing. A beautiful, crystalline numbness. I got up from my desk. I walked to the break room. I poured myself a glass of water. I drank it slowly. I watched my reflection in the dark window. I looked the same, but the eyes were different. The light of hope had been replaced by the cold, steady glow of a predator's gaze. I went back to the terminal. I didn't just mirror the accounts this time. I opened the heartbeat sensors wide. I removed the limiters. If Sarah or Marcus tried to initiate the Project Exit command on Friday morning, they wouldn't just be framing me. They would be triggering an automated report to the SEC, the FBI, and every major investor on the board, complete with their own IP addresses and digital signatures attached to every stolen cent. I was no longer trying to save my job. I was preparing to burn the entire house down with them inside it. They think I'm the liability. They think I'm the one who needs closure. Tomorrow, I'm going to show them exactly what a liability looks like when it has nothing left to fear. I looked at the clock. 3:14 a.m. That night, I went home, I took a long hot shower, and I slept for 4 hours, the best sleep I'd had in years. When I woke up, the world was gray. But for the first time, I could see perfectly. Friday morning didn't come with the usual sense of dread. There was no racing heart, no sweaty palms. I woke up before my alarm, my mind as clear as a winter sky. I chose my outfit with the precision of a general preparing for a final stand. A sharp, white silk blouse, the color of a blank slate. A black tailored blazer. My hair pulled back so tight it pulled at my temples. I wanted to look like the most stable, most competent person in any room I entered. I wanted to give them nothing to use against me. I walked into Sterling Heights Plaza at 8 a.m. Arthur, the security guard, gave me the same hollow look as always. I didn't look away this time. I smiled. Fake smile. "Good morning, Arthur. It's going to be a monumental day." He looked confused. I didn't wait for a response. I went to my office and sat down. I didn't open the Henderson files. I didn't check my email. I just sat there, hands folded on my desk, watching the office wake up. I watched the junior associates scurry by with their coffees. I watched the light hit the glass walls. They thought I was healing. They thought the false hope talk from Marcus had worked and I was back in the fold, ready to be led to the slaughter. I wasn't healing. I was calculating. Sarah walked past my office around 9:30. She was carrying a box of Vanguard-branded cupcakes. She stopped, seeing me sitting there in the stillness. "Hey, Elena," she said, her voice dripping with that new, patronizing sweetness. "You look well-rested. Marcus said you were feeling much better." "I feel excellent, Sarah," I said. "Truly. I've reached a state of total clarity." She tilted her head, her eyes scanning me for a crack. "Good. Because we're doing the final server sync at 4 p.m. today. Marcus said you'd have the encryption keys ready by then?" "They'll be ready," I said. "I'm just doing a final integrity check. I want everything to be perfect for the board." "Perfect," she echoed, her smile widening. "You're such a pro, Elena. I don't know how you do it. I do it because I'm the one who wrote the world you're standing on, Sarah. And you're about to find out how quickly a foundation can turn into a trap." I watched her walk away. I noticed the way she walked now with a bounce of unearned confidence. She really thought she had bypassed me. She thought Marcus was her partner, and I was just the ghost of the past. She didn't know that Marcus had already drafted her fall guy contingencies too. In the dossier I'd found, Marcus had a secondary file on Sarah Miller detailing her lack of technical oversight should the siphoning be discovered. He wasn't just betraying me. He was betraying everyone. He was a black hole, consuming everything in his orbit to keep his own light burning. Around noon, I saw Marcus. He was standing in the center of the floor, surrounded by the senior partners. He was pointing at the Vanguard logo on the wall, gesturing broadly, selling the future. He caught my eye. He gave me a thumbs up and a wink. I nodded back. They thought they had me cornered. They thought they were the puppeteers, and I was the marionette whose strings were being cut at 4 p.m. But what they didn't realize was that I had already cut my own strings. I was just standing still so they wouldn't notice I was free. I spent the afternoon doing something they never expected. I wasn't hiding data. I was documenting it. I was screen recording every one of Sarah's administrative logins. I was tagging the IP addresses. I was building a digital map that traced the siphoned funds directly to the offshore accounts I'd seen in the dossier. Revenge isn't a scream. It isn't a dramatic confrontation in a hallway. It's a quiet, cold process of ensuring that when the floor falls out, you're the only one who knows how to fly. And then I realized, I didn't need to fight them to win. I didn't need to beg for my job back or prove my sanity. I already had the leverage. Not just the code. Not just the keys. I had the one thing that Marcus Sterling feared more than death, the paper trail of his own greed. The clock hit 3 p.m., 1 hour left. I stood up, walked to the printer, and picked up a single sheet of paper. I folded it, put it in my blazer pocket, and headed toward Marcus's office for our final meeting. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the architect of the aftermath. I stepped into Marcus's office at exactly 3:01 p.m. The view from his window was breathtaking, the entire city laid out like a circuit board, pulsating with life and money. Marcus was sitting behind his mahogany desk, leaning back with his hands laced behind his head. He looked like a king surveying his kingdom. "Elena," he said, his smile wide and effortless. "Right on time. I was just telling Arthur that your punctuality is one of your greatest assets. Did you bring the keys?" "I brought something better, Marcus," I said, sitting down in the chair opposite him. I didn't wait to be asked. "I brought clarity." He tilted his head, his smile faltering just a fraction of a millimeter. "Clarity? That sounds philosophical. But right now, I need technical. Sarah is waiting in the server room to finalize the Vanguard sync." I leaned forward, placing my hands flat on his desk. "Sarah is currently logged into a ghost partition on the Sterling & Co. server. She thinks she's migrating data. What she's actually doing is triggering a forensic audit trail that links her terminal and your credentials to a series of siphoned transactions headed for a Cayman account registered under a shell company called Apex Horizon." The air in the room seemed to vanish. Marcus just stared at me. Then, he laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. Elena, this is exactly what I was worried about. This paranoia. This is the erratic behavior Arthur and I discussed. You're seeing ghosts in the machine because you're tired. I'm not tired, Marcus. And I'm not paranoid. I pulled the folded piece of paper from my blazer pocket and slid it across the desk. I'm the architect. He picked up the paper. It wasn't a list of encryption keys. It was a screenshot of the Vance liability closure dossier I had found on the encrypted thread, but with one addition, a time-stamped log showing that I had successfully mirrored that file to 3 external, encrypted servers, programmed to release to the SEC and the State Medical Board if I didn't check in by 6 p.m. But that wasn't the real leverage. "Look at the second page, Marcus," I whispered. He flipped the sheet. His face went from pale to a sickly, grayish-white. "You think the Phoenix Project, the Vanguard, is just a piece of software," I said, my voice steady and cold. "But you forgot that I built it as a living system. Every time you or Sarah move money through that back door, it doesn't just record the transaction. It encrypts the stolen funds into a digital vault that requires my biometric signature to unlock. You haven't siphoned a single cent. You've just moved it into a cage that only I have the key to." He thought he was stealing the company's future. He didn't realize he was just acting as my personal courier, delivering the evidence of his own crimes into a vault he can never open. You can't do this," he hissed. "This is sabotage. This is a crime." "No," I replied. "Trying to have a sane employee committed to a mental institution to hide your embezzlement, that is a crime. I'm just practicing asset protection." I stood up. I felt taller than I had in years. I felt like the glass walls of his office were finally transparent. "You have 2 choices, Marcus. You can go ahead with the 4 p.m. sync. Sarah will trigger the alarm, the FBI will be here by dinner, and you'll spend the next 20 years explaining Apex Horizon to a federal judge. Or what?" he asked, his voice trembling. "Or you wait," I said. "You wait for me to decide when the sync happens. You keep Sarah away from the terminal. And you realize that from this moment on, you don't own this firm." "I do. All I had to do was wait. I didn't need to strike yet. I had the lever in my hand, and the world was exactly where I wanted it to be." I walked out of his office without looking back. I passed Sarah in the hallway. She was tapping her foot, looking at her watch, clearly impatient to start the heist. "Is he ready?" she asked, her eyes darting to Marcus's door. "He's reconsidering a few things," I said, giving her a polite, empty smile. "You might want to hold off on that sync, Sarah. The weather is changing." I went back to my desk and sat down. I looked at the clock. 3:45 p.m. The leverage was in place. The trap was set. Now, the first domino was about to fall, and they wouldn't even know it was me who pushed it. Revenge is often depicted as a lightning bolt, fast, loud, and destructive. But real revenge, the kind that lasts, is more like a leak in a dam. It starts small. A tiny crack. A bead of water. And then, before you even realize you're in danger, the weight of everything you've built comes crashing down on your head. I sat at my desk at 4:15 p.m. The final sync was supposed to have happened 15 minutes ago. The office was vibrating with a strange, nervous energy. People were looking at their monitors, whispering. The technical team was huddled in the corner, looking at a tablet and shaking their heads. I didn't have to do anything. I just watched. Through the glass of Marcus's office, I saw Sarah burst into his room, her face flushed, her arms waving. She was pointing at her laptop. She looked terrified. Marcus was standing behind his desk, his face a mask of frozen rage. He looked like a man who had just realized the floor beneath him was made of paper. They tried to initiate the siphoning script. They couldn't help themselves. Greed is a reflex for people like them, but instead of siphoning the funds, the system did exactly what I programmed it to do. It locked the Henderson account, the very one they tried to use as a cover, and sent an automated security alert to the client's CFO. The phone on Marcus's desk didn't just ring. It screamed. It was the red line, the direct link to our biggest stakeholders. I saw Marcus pick it up. I watched his shoulders slump. I watched him sit down, hard, as if the air had been kicked out of his lungs. Sarah was still talking, her mouth moving a mile a minute, clearly trying to blame the glitch on the legacy code. On me. But Marcus wasn't listening to her anymore. He was looking at the screen, where a massive, red system integrity compromised banner was flashing, a banner I had designed to only appear on his workstation. It was a small consequence in the grand scheme of things, a single client account frozen, a single phone call from a confused CFO. But in the world of high-stakes finance, a glitch during a major launch is a death sentence for a reputation. I stood up and walked toward the break room to get a glass of water. As I passed them, Sarah came storming out of Marcus's office. She nearly ran into me. "What did you do?" she hissed, her eyes wide and bloodshot. "The server is rejecting the admin credentials. You sabotaged the sync." I stopped. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my water. I looked at her with the kind of calm that only comes from knowing you're untouchable. "I don't know what you're talking about, Sarah," I said softly. "I'm just a senior lead working on quarterly filings. Maybe you should check your syntax. I hear the Vanguard system is very sensitive to unauthorized hands." The beauty of the trap was its simplicity. They couldn't call IT. If they called the technical department to fix the error, the technicians would see the backdoor script Sarah had tried to run. They were trapped in a cage of their own making, forced to maintain the illusion of control while the system slowly bled them dry. They blamed the wrong person. Marcus called a snap meeting with the IT director, a man named Kevin, and tried to frame Sarah right there in the hallway. "She must have misconfigured the migration," Marcus shouted, his voice cracking. "I told her to wait for Elena's keys, but she went ahead anyway. She's ruined the Henderson integration." Sarah's face went white. The girl who had been his protégé 10 minutes ago was now his primary target. I watched from my desk, as she began to cry, not out of sadness, but out of the sheer, panicked realization that she was being fed to the wolves by the man who had promised her the world. Eat each other, I thought. Go ahead. Tear the flesh off each other's bones. It saves me the trouble. By 5 p.m., the news was spreading through the office. The Vanguard launch was being delayed due to technical inconsistencies. The partners were furious. Arthur, the board member who had helped Marcus draft my commitment papers, was seen pacing the lobby, looking at his watch every 30 seconds. I packed my bag. I didn't rush. I straightened my pens. I turned off my lamp. As I walked toward the elevator, I saw Marcus staring at me through his window. He looked ancient. He looked like a ghost haunting his own office. I didn't wave. I didn't smile. I just stepped into the elevator and pressed L. The first consequence had hit. Their trust was gone. Their plan was in tatters, and they still had no idea that the worst was yet to come. There is a specific frequency to panic. It's high-pitched, vibrating just beneath the level of human hearing, making the air feel thin. By Monday morning, that vibration had turned the office into a pressure cooker. The weekend had been a disaster for them. I knew because I spent my Sunday morning in a quiet cafe, sipping an oat milk latte while watching the heartbeat logs on my encrypted tablet. Every 3 hours, Marcus or Sarah or both had tried to force the server to sync. Every 3 hours, the system rejected them, adding another layer of security encryption that made the data even harder to reach. They were like children pulling on a Chinese finger trap. The harder they pulled, the tighter it squeezed. I was sitting in my office, intentionally reading a physical book, a biography of Machiavelli, just for the irony when the shadow fell across my desk. It was Sarah. She looked like she hadn't slept since 2022. Her expensive makeup was smudged, and her hair was pulled into a messy, frantic knot. Gone was the vanguard goddess. In her place was a terrified girl who realized she'd been playing with fire in a room full of gasoline. "Elena," she whispered, her voice cracking. We have a problem. A big one." I didn't look up from my book for a full 5 seconds. I let the silence stretch until it became a physical weight. Then, I slowly marked my page and looked at her. "A problem, Sarah? I thought the vanguard was the future. I thought you had breathed new life into the firm." She flinched. "Please. Marcus is. He's losing his mind. The Henderson account didn't just freeze. The audit flag has reached the compliance department. They're asking for the source code to prove there wasn't an external hack. If they see the script that you wrote?" I finished for her, tilting my head. "He told me to." She burst out, the tears finally spilling over. "He said it was a performance buffer. He said it was standard procedure for a high-level rollout." "Elena, I'm 22. I don't want to go to prison." 22. Old enough to steal a life's work. Old enough to smile while a mentor is being framed. But suddenly too young to face the consequences. "I'm sorry, Sarah," I said, my voice as neutral as a dial tone. "But I don't have access to those files anymore. Remember? Executive level and authorized assistants only. I'm just a senior lead with a toxic, possessive streak." "Your words, I believe." "Elena. My office. Now." I stood up. Sarah looked at me with a desperate, pleading hope. I walked past her without a word. Marcus's office was a mess. Papers were strewn across the floor. The Vanguard trophies he'd ordered were sitting in a cardboard box, as if he were already preparing to vacate. He wasn't sitting. He was pacing the length of the window, his suit jacket discarded on the floor. "Fix it," he said, without turning around. "Fix what, Marcus?" He turned and I almost gasped. The man had aged a decade in 48 hours. His eyes were bloodshot and he was trembling. "The system. The heartbeat thing. Whatever you did to lock us out, undo it. The board is meeting in 2 hours. Arthur is breathing down my neck. He thinks I've lost control of the assets. I can't undo what I didn't do." "Marcus," I said, leaning against the doorframe. "You told the board the system was stable. You told them I was the one who was unstable. If I fix it now, it proves I was the only one who could run it. It proves you lied." He walked toward me, his hands shaking. He looked like he wanted to grab me, but something in my expression, the utter lack of fear, made him stop. "What do you want?" he hissed. "Money? The partnership? I'll give you whatever you want. Just make the audit flags go away. Tell them it was a stress test error you were running. They came to me for help. The people who tried to have me committed, who stole my career, who mocked my grief. They were now at my feet, begging for the very expertise they claimed I didn't have. "I don't want your money, Marcus," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. "And I don't want a partnership in a firm that's currently on fire." "Then what?" I looked at the clock. "I want you to prepare for the board meeting. I want you to tell them exactly how successful the Vanguard rollout has been. I want you to be the CEO you always claimed to be." I turned and walked out. They thought they were winning. They thought the panic was the climax. They didn't realize that the panic was just the opening act. There is a profound stillness that comes just before a controlled demolition. The engineers have placed the charges. The wires are laid. The perimeter is cleared. All that's left is the countdown. I spent the hour before the board meeting in the firm's physical archives. It was the only place in the building without a camera, a dusty labyrinth of paper in a world that had gone digital. I wasn't looking for code here. I was looking for the one thing Marcus couldn't delete. The original, signed intellectual property agreement I'd signed when I was hired 5 years ago. I found it. Paragraph 14, Section C. Any proprietary architecture developed on a private shell prior to employment remains the sole property of the developer unless purchased under a separate title transfer. Marcus had been so arrogant, so sure of his power, that he never bothered to have me sign that transfer. He thought company property was a blanket that covered everything his employees touched. He was wrong. I sat on a crate of old files and opened my laptop one last time. I didn't fix the system for Marcus. I didn't make the audit flags go away. Instead, I set the final conditions. I programmed the Vanguard core to perform a black box shutdown at exactly 4:15 p.m., the midpoint of the board meeting. When that happens, the system won't just stop. It will display a single legal notice across every screen in the building, including the one in the boardroom. A notice of copyright infringement and unauthorized use of proprietary assets. He wants a show? I'll give him a show. But it won't be the one he rehearsed with Sarah. I saw Marcus and Arthur walking toward the executive boardroom. Marcus had pulled himself together. He'd changed his shirt, splashed cold water on his face, and put on his billion-dollar smile. He looked like a man who was still winning. He saw me standing by the archives door. He paused, adjusting his cufflinks. "Last chance, Elena," he whispered, leaning in. "Hand over the bypass code now, and I'll tell the board the technical glitch was a test you performed to ensure security. I'll make you the hero of the day. You'll have your career back." I looked at him, and for the first time, I felt a genuine sense of wonder. Not at his cruelty, but at his delusion. He truly believed that everyone had a price. He couldn't conceive of a world where someone would rather see the building burn than live in it as a slave. "I don't want to be a hero, Marcus," I said softly. "I just want to be the owner." He scoffed, a short, sharp sound of derision. "Suit yourself. Enjoy the unemployment line. I've already told HR to have your final check ready by 5. The stakes were now clarified. If I failed, I would be fired, discredited, and likely facing a legal battle for sabotage. If I succeeded, Marcus would be exposed, the Vanguard project would be legally frozen, and the board would have to deal with the fact that their CEO was a thief. I walked back to my desk. I didn't pack. I didn't look at my emails. I just sat down and opened a stopwatch on my phone. Sarah was sitting at her desk, staring at her monitor, her hands hovering over the keys. She was waiting for the system to magically fix itself. She was waiting for the lie to become the truth. She looked at me, her eyes red-rimmed. "Elena, please. Just tell me what to do." "Do nothing, Sarah," I said, without looking at her. "The time for doing is over. Now, we just watch." They thought they were winning. They thought they had the votes, the power, and the narrative. They didn't realize that I wasn't playing their game anymore. I had moved the game to a different court, one where the only currency was the truth, and they were both bankrupt. There is no sound in the world quite like the silence of a room full of powerful people realizing they've been sold a lie. It isn't a quiet silence. It's a loud, ringing vacuum that sucks the air out of the lungs. I stood in the hallway just outside the double mahogany doors of the executive boardroom. Inside, Marcus was in the middle of his vision for the future speech. I could hear the resonance of his voice, that practiced, charismatic baritone that had fooled me for 5 years. He was talking about unprecedented growth, seamless integration, and the brilliance of the Vanguard architecture. I looked at my watch. 4 hours 14 minutes and 55 seconds. 4 hours 14 minutes and 56 seconds. Count it down, Marcus. Every word you speak right now is a debt you can't pay back. It happened exactly on the second. Every screen in the boardroom, the massive projector, the individual tablets in front of the partners, even the digital clock on the wall flashed a searing, clinical white. Then, the text appeared. Legal notice. Unauthorized use of proprietary assets. System lockdown initiated. Intellectual property violation detected. Shell identifier Phoenix Beta. I pushed the doors open. The scene was cinematic. Marcus was frozen mid-gesture, his hand pointing toward a screen that now bore my digital signature instead of his logo. Arthur, the senior board member, was standing up, his face a shade of purple I'd never seen on a human being. Sarah was in the corner, her face buried in her hands. "What is the meaning of this, Marcus?" Arthur roared. "Who is Phoenix Beta?" Marcus turned, his eyes landing on me as I walked toward the head of the table. His mask didn't just slip, it disintegrated. He looked small. He looked like a child caught standing over a broken vase. "Elena," he stammered, his voice thin and reedy. "There's been a technical glitch. I told you she was unstable. She's hacking the presentation." "I'm not hacking anything, Arthur," I said, my voice cutting through the panic like a blade through silk. You can't hack what you own. I am the sole proprietor of the code running this firm. And as of 60 seconds ago, I've revoked the license for Sterling & Co. to use it. I slid my tablet across the table. It didn't show the Vanguard slides. It showed the original 2021 timestamp of my proprietary shell. It showed the lack of a title transfer. And then, it showed the Apex Horizon logs. But more importantly, I continued. You might want to ask Marcus why he was using my architecture to siphon $42 million of client capital into an offshore account while telling you the system was experiencing integration delays. The room didn't erupt. It imploded. The board members didn't look at me. They looked at Marcus. And Marcus. Marcus looked at the floor. He didn't have a rebuttal. He didn't have a charm. He had been stripped of his narrative. And without a story to tell, Marcus Sterling was nothing but a man in an expensive suit who had run out of time. Sarah Miller, Arthur said, his voice cold enough to freeze the water in the carafe. Is this true? Sarah looked up, her eyes darting between Marcus and the board. She saw the ship sinking. She did the only thing a shark knows how to do. He made me do it, she sobbed. He said he'd fire me. He has the dossier on Elena. He was going to frame her for all of it. I stood there, watching the two of them tear each other apart. There was no shouting from my end. No gloating. No I told you so. I just felt a profound sense of weightlessness. The truth hadn't just come out. It had leveled the building. Get them out of here, Arthur whispered to the security detail. And call the firm's legal counsel. Now. As Marcus was led past me, he stopped for a fraction of a second. He looked at me with a hatred so pure it was almost beautiful. You burned it all, he hissed. You destroyed $1 billion company for what? Pride? No, Marcus, I said, looking him dead in the eye. For the truth. You just happened to be standing in its way. But that wasn't the end. The collapse of a titan creates a vacuum. And I was the only one left who knew how to fill it. When a building is demolished, the dust stays in the air for hours. It clogs the throat and blurs the vision. The corporate world is no different. The hours after the boardroom collapse were a mist of blue light and black ink. I stayed in the office, but I wasn't at my desk. I was in the library, watching through the glass as the world I had known for 5 years was dismantled. I watched Marcus being escorted out of the building. He didn't have his briefcase. He didn't have his phone. He just had that same hollow look I'd carried into the rain 2 weeks ago. Sarah followed shortly after, her face shielded by her hair, escorted by 2 HR representatives and a legal officer. The Vanguard logo was still glowing on the walls, but it looked different now. It looked like a tombstone. The ripple effect was immediate. By 7 p.m., the Henderson account had been officially moved to a secure holding state. By 8 p.m., Arthur, the man who had plotted my commitment, was stepping down for health reasons. The firm didn't close, but it was changed. The sharks were gone, replaced by a terrified group of partners who suddenly realized they didn't know how the engines of their own company worked. I sat in the quiet of the archives, drinking a cup of tea that had gone cold. It's strange. I thought I would feel a surge of triumph. I thought I would want to stand on the desk and scream. But all I felt was a deep, quiet stillness. The weight that had been crushing my chest for months was just gone. I looked at my phone. A dozen missed calls from recruiters. 100 messages from colleagues who had ignored me for weeks, now suddenly checking in to see if I was okay. I didn't answer any of them. I didn't need their validation anymore. I had found my own. The legal fallout would take years. There would be depositions, trials, and endless paperwork. But for me, the story ended the moment I walked out of that boardroom. I saw Arthur, the security guard, one last time on my way out. He looked at me, and this time he nodded. Not a nod of pity, but one of respect. He held the door open for me. I stepped out into the night. The air was sharp and smelled of ozone. The city lights were reflected in the puddles on the sidewalk, turning the pavement into a sea of neon. I didn't have a box this time. I didn't have a dead succulent or a world's best lead mug. I just had my keys and my name. For the first time in 5 years. I felt light. I wasn't an engine. I wasn't an asset. I wasn't a liability. I was just Elena. And for the first time, that was enough. They tell you that when you win, you should feel a rush of adrenaline. But true victory is quiet. It's the absence of noise. It's the first morning you wake up and your heart isn't already racing to catch up with a deadline that doesn't matter. It had been 6 months since the collapse of Sterling & Co. The headlines had faded. Marcus Sterling's name was now a footnote in a cautionary tale about corporate overreach, whispered in business schools. Sarah Miller had vanished into the suburbs, her rising star extinguished before it ever really left the ground. I didn't go back to a glass tower. I didn't take any of the head of creative positions that were flung at my feet like peace offerings from firms that would have just as easily sacrificed me if the roles were reversed. I bought a small house. Not a penthouse, a house. With a garden that needed tending and a porch that caught the afternoon sun. I spent the first 3 months just relearning who I was when I wasn't Elena the architect. I realized I didn't actually like black coffee. I'd only drunk it because it was the fastest way to get caffeine into my system at 6 a.m. I realized I liked to paint not digital interfaces but messy, abstract oils that didn't have to convert or scale. I started my own consultancy. But this time, it was different. I didn't hire hungry interns or sharks. I hired people who had been discarded. The brilliant coder who was too old for Silicon Valley. The strategist who took a 3-year gap to raise her kids and was told her brain had gone soft. We work from my garden. We work 4 days a week. And every contract we sign has paragraph 14 section C written in bold at the very top. I used to think my identity was tied to the height of my office floor. Now I know my identity is the boundary I draw around my soul. I saw a photo of Marcus in a digital tabloid recently. He was leaving a courthouse, his suit looking a little too big for him, his face gaunt. I felt nothing. No hate. No pity. He was just a man who had tried to build a kingdom on a foundation of air. I went back to the Sterling Heights Plaza once. Not to go inside but to pick up that silver stapler I dropped in the rain that night. I didn't find it, of course. It had been swept away long ago. But as I stood there, looking at the revolving doors, I realized I didn't need it. That stapler was a relic of a woman who thought she had to be a tool for someone else's success. If I could speak to my old self, the woman standing in the rain with that cardboard box, I wouldn't tell her it gets better. I'd tell her she's finally free. I'd tell her that the weight she's feeling isn't the world crushing her, it's the old skin falling away so the new one can breathe. I looked at my reflection in the glass of the lobby. I didn't see a victim. I didn't see a senior-led. I saw a woman who knew her worth. And that is a weapon no CEO can ever take away. There's a myth we're sold from the moment we enter the workforce. We're told that if we give our lives to a company, the company will give us a life in return. We're told that loyalty is a two-way street, and that if we just work a little harder, sleep a little less, and sacrifice a little more, we'll eventually be untouchable. I was a believer in that myth. I was a high priestess at the altar of hustle. But the truth is much colder. A corporation is a machine designed to consume. It doesn't have a heart, it doesn't have a memory, and it certainly doesn't have a soul. It only has an appetite. Marcus Sterling wasn't an anomaly. He was just the most honest version of that machine. He saw me as fuel. When the fuel was spent, he looked for a way to dispose of the ash. But he forgot one thing. Ash is what's left after a fire, and fire can be rebuilt. Today, my life is smaller, but it's real. I don't measure my success by the number of zeros in a corporate budget, but by the number of hours I spend in the sun. I realized that the Vanguard project wasn't my greatest achievement. My greatest achievement was the moment I stopped asking for permission to exist from people who didn't even deserve my time. Revenge is often misunderstood. People think it's about making the other person suffer as much as you did. But that's just a cycle. True revenge, the kind that settles deep in your bones and lets you sleep at night, is living a life that they no longer have the power to touch. Marcus is still fighting legal battles. Sarah is still trying to explain away her resume. They are still trapped in the world of shadows and mirrors, constantly looking over their shoulders to see who is coming for them next. I am not looking back. I've learned that the most dangerous person in the world isn't the one with the most money or the most power. It's the person who has nothing to hide. It's the person who has walked through the fire of betrayal and come out the other side with their integrity intact. If you're sitting in your car right now, or at your desk, or lying in bed wondering why you're giving your best years to people who wouldn't even notice if you disappeared tomorrow, listen to me. Your value is not a market rate. Your worth is not a KPI. You are the architect of your own life, and the only person who can truly fire you from that role is yourself. I told you this story not just to entertain you but to warn you. There are Marcuses in every office. There are Sarahs in every hallway. And right now, as you listen to my voice, the algorithm is deciding if you're the kind of person who learns from the truth or the kind of person who ignores the warnings until it's too late. If you've made it this far, through betrayal and justice, and you still haven't subscribed, ask yourself why. Are you waiting for your own rainy night to realize you're alone? Do you think that by staying silent, you're safe? Subscribe now. Don't think twice. Because when you subscribe, you're joining a community that refuses to be fuel for someone else's fire. And for those of you who will walk away without clicking that button, I want you to go into the comments right now. I want you to explain to everyone here why you think your loyalty to the people who would replace you in a heartbeat is worth more than your own voice. Tell us why you're choosing to stay in the shadows. We're all waiting to hear your excuse.